Right now, we are almost in the dead zone of the Dynasty offseason. I mean, there's not much going on, but what we can do is we can go check out our rosters. We can look across the entire league and we can go, okay, well, maybe there are some buy low candidates. Maybe there are some players I should be looking to sell. And y'all know we always do this. I'm always diving in to these options and trying to give you, in my opinion, the best breakdown that you are going to get on both the reasons why you should like a player versus why you shouldn't like a player. And you can go through and decide for yourself. But as we did with the wide receivers, I think at this time of the offseason, it's going to be very beneficial for us to use probably the best tool that we have been given this offseason, and that is real redraft ADP. Checking out redraft ADP, particularly underdog ADP, because millions of dollars have been pumped into those drafts already. So we can cross-reference 2022 expectations from the overall community with current Dynasty trade value and go, okay, well, does this add up? And I think you're going to see some pretty cool instances of players that no, it doesn't make sense with. But before we get into it, please go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. You know what I'm going to ask for already. And I think that should be it. Let's go through. Let's just dive right in. And our first running back is going to be Mr. Cam Akers. So Cam Akers, drafted in 2020, is extremely young. Cam Akers still on that rookie contract. And on top of this, Darrell Henderson has 1 year left in Los Angeles. Darrell Henderson drafted in 2019. He was drafted in the 3rd round, so he doesn't have the 5th year option. So you're looking at Cam Akers as a running back that now is going into this upcoming season with no Sony Michel. But more importantly, next season, you also may not have Darrell Henderson in this offense. So if we look at that combined with the fact that Cam Akers turns 23 on June 22nd. Depending on where you're watching this, Cam Akers is only 22 or 23 years old. I think we can all agree Cam Akers is a more appealing option for the long term than he may be this upcoming season. Because if we think about it in the long term, he'll just be further and further removed away from that torn Achilles. But despite all of this, Cam Akers is currently being drafted as the running back 16 on Underdog and the running back 17 on Keep Trade Cut. So you have a lowered price point for Cam Akers in Dynasty, despite, in my opinion, him having a better long-term outlook than he would in redraft. Like if we go through and we look at some of these names. So right now, Cam Akers, the perfect example of this is if we look at him compared to a running back like J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins, I mean, if you look at the situation in Baltimore, I don't necessarily want to say he's a significantly worse option than Cam Akers, but we can assume that the overall Los Angeles Rams offense is going to be more productive. We can assume that Cam Akers will draw more targets out of the backfield. And right now, you're seeing Cam Akers have an ADP where he's going a full round ahead of J.K. Dobbins in redraft leagues. But despite all this and the fact that Cam Akers projects to get better going forward, you have J.K. Dobbins as the running back 12, according to Keep Trade Cut. Cam Akers as the running back 17. There's a massive tier drop between these guys as well. This doesn't make sense. We can go through and we can look at other examples. I mean, you can pull up on Keep Trade Cut the fact that Nick Chubb's a running back that is about to be going into year 3 of his second contract. Nick Chubb is 26 years old, 4 years older than Cam Akers. These guys aren't going that far apart in redraft. Redraft expectations are almost in line for both of these players, but the Dynasty Fantasy Football community easily prefers Nick Chubb over Cam Akers. Same thing with Travis Etienne here. You have Travis Etienne in Dynasty as the running back 8 as a fast riser. However, Travis Etienne currently being drafted behind Cam Akers in redraft. Cam Akers and Travis Etienne are the same age. Cam Akers actually may be younger than Travis Etienne. Let me pull this up real quick. It doesn't necessarily matter who's younger by a month, but no, I'm surprised to see this. Travis Etienne is about 6-7 months older than Akers. So if we go through and if we just revisit Cam Akers right now and we go, okay, well, is there something we are missing? we have to go back to what we had in 2020, his rookie season. Remember, this is a running back that his rookie year as well, he was dealing with bruised ribs. He was dealing with so many different issues that limited him on a per game basis during the season. Remember, we thought that this was going to be an option that missed almost the entire year whenever he went down with the bruised ribs. We thought he was going to miss 6 to 8 weeks. He came back like 2 weeks later, and then he was almost like a healthy scratch because they would activate him for the game, but they wouldn't put him on the field. He would go through an entire game only seeing 1 to 2 touches. So that skews his overall finish. When you see that he is the running back 53 his rookie season with 11 carries a game, that's not something we can fairly evaluate him with. But what we can potentially look at is we can potentially look at the breakout that he had at the end of the season. The last month of the year, if we just go through this, oh my gosh, Cam Akers was an animal. Cam Akers had 72 yards, 171, 63, 34, 131, 90 rushing yards. He was getting involved as a receiver as well. If you look at Cam Akers, 21, 29, 15, 21, 28, 18 carries. Targets, you had 1, 3, 3, 4, 2, 1. So not Christian McCaffrey by any means, but he was a net positive in the receiving game. Now, of course, if we cross-reference this with what you had at the end of this past season, yeah, it was horrendous. I don't even want to pull up the numbers, but if you look at it, Thomas, please just throw them up. Cam Akers was one of the least efficient running backs in the NFL, but there are a couple things going on. Look at the teams he had to go up against during that stretch. Going up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, one of the toughest run defenses in the NFL. Those were bad matchups. And on top of it, the man was 6 months removed from a torn Achilles. So I hate to play two separate sides of the fence here, but I mean, we actually made this video on our redraft channel, and I went through and I said, oh yeah, Cam Akers, he's going at the end of the 3rd round in redraft leagues. This is a running back that's probably going too high in redraft. I probably prefer someone like David Montgomery over him if we're going to get David Montgomery an entire round after Cam Akers. But in Dynasty, it's almost the exact opposite. In Dynasty, where you should be more excited, he has a cheaper price tag. So I think he's probably overvalued on Underdog Fantasy, undervalued in your Dynasty League. If you want to create a natural portfolio, just go through and trade for him in Dynasty and let the profits come in when the man's 23 years old next offseason with no Darrell Henderson. But let's move on to our next guy. And actually, before we get into him, let me tell you about Underdog Fantasy. If you have not done so already, go sign up for Underdog Fantasy. Link in the description of the video. Everybody knows this by now. On Underdog Fantasy, that's where you can get in real money fantasy football drafts today. There have already been over $1 million worth of fantasy football drafts kicked off this offseason. I can say we probably spent too much money of our own on those drafts as well. But when you go and sign up and you use promo code FLOCK, they will match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100. You will also get our 2022 rankings, our Dynasty rankings, our Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide. You'll get so much. Find the link in the description. But let's move on to our next player. And this is going to be someone that is not the best example to look at because he's a contending asset. James Conner. Now, before we dive into it, yes, James Conner should be significantly more expensive in redraft than he would be in Dynasty. He's going into his age 27 season. You are drafting James Conner for this season. And honestly, after that, what we have to do is we have to look at the contract. Now, what I'll say is that James Conner contract is favorable. Not only does he get obviously the guaranteed money this season, but even in 2023, he has $10 million guaranteed. He has $10 million guaranteed. So you're drafting James Conner in Dynasty for this year and for next year and nothing really beyond that. But if we go through and if we cross-reference right now some of the other running backs that he is alongside in Dynasty value, you have James Conner valued below Ezekiel Elliott would be the perfect example where we can go, okay, well, with Ezekiel Elliott, currently the active leader in career touches in the NFL. I mean, the man is a freaking monster, and he's put some tread on those tires. You're drafting Ezekiel Elliott for this season. You're drafting Ezekiel Elliott for next year as well, because next year the Dallas Cowboys still owe him $11 million guaranteed. So bravo to Ezekiel Elliott's agent. Bravo to probably make Zeke one of the most overvalued players in the NFL, but nonetheless, he's going to be 27 this year as well. So you're looking at the combination of Zeke and James Conner as pure contending pieces just for 2022 and 2023. And if we go through and if we look at the fact that James Conner is going a full round ahead of Ezekiel Elliott on Underdog right now in redraft leagues where people know what they're doing. And we can go through and we can look at something very similar with other running backs in this range where James Conner, running back 27 on Keep Trade Cut. Elijah Mitchell, another example of a running back that you're not really drafting for his long-term value. If you look at how quickly the NFL churns through those running backs, how quickly the NFL churns through those running backs that don't really have the draft capital, and you're seeing James Conner drafted 3 rounds before him in redraft leagues when we know James Conner is giving you that production over the next 2 seasons. Honestly, I think he's a great trade target in dynasty formats. I feel like people haven't given the man his respect based on the contract that he received this offseason. I mean, I was hesitant at the beginning of the offseason before he got this contract. And with James Conner, the selling point is no Chase Edmonds coming into this season. This is a running back that we've seen before. What a fully healthy, what James Conner in a 3-down workload looks like. Back in 2018 in Pittsburgh, the man averaged almost 18 carries a game, almost 6 targets a game, and over 100 total yards a game. Now, if we cross-reference this with the most recent view that we have had of James Conner without Chase Edmonds, according to Rotoviz, we got this from there. There have been 5 games where James Conner has played with no Chase Edmonds in 2021. In those 5 games, James Conner averaged 23 points per game. That's more than Jonathan Taylor last year. The man averaged a whopping 5 targets out of the backfield, 16.6 rush attempts without Chase Edmonds. Not a big gap with the rush attempts, but the usage in the receiving game gets the bump up. That's what we are going to be looking for. He also averaged almost 100 rushing yards a game. Now, I'll say he's not going to get to 23 points per game. That's ludicrous. It will never happen again. And the reason he was there in the first place is he ran hot with touchdowns. He was unsustainable with his touchdown rate almost throughout the entire season. That's going to come down to earth. Kyler Murray will be vulturing him at the goal line, but still, he will be a 3-down bell cow running back, one of the most productive offenses in football. I'm drafting James Conner. Now let's move over to our next running back. This is going to be someone that some people will argue he is more appealing in redraft. I think it's crazy to argue that considering the man's 23 years old and he's going into year 3 of his rookie deal. Clyde EdwardsHelaire. Now, if you pull up Clyde EdwardsHelaire right now on Underdog, the man is being drafted as the running back 26 in fantasy. Whereas in Dynasty, keep in mind, he's 23 years old. He's going as the running back 28. Now, with CEH, one of the reasons why I think that you shouldn't necessarily worry about this team going through and replacing him next offseason, and why I think that he is almost locked and loaded into this role over the next 2 years, is look at the resources that the Kansas City Chiefs have available to them. Partly because they decided to select a running back in Clyde EdwardsHelaire in 2020 and make a very bad decision. This team is extremely limited. I know some people want to say, oh my gosh, Mason, the Patrick Mahomes contract is so flexible. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, if this contract is so flexible, why are they moving off Tyreek Hill? Why are they trading Tyreek Hill for a first in Patrick Mahomes' prime at the very end of Kelsey's career so they could try to get some more cap space? Like, no. Don't try to tell me, oh, his contract's flexible. They can bring in whoever they can't bring in whoever they want. This is a team that has massive holes on the defensive side as well as in the receiver core. Running back is a luxury position. Running back is a luxury position. Maybe they go through and maybe they just bring in another depth piece. Like Ronald Jones, the perfect example. They bring in Ronald Jones this offseason to a 1-year cheap deal. That's the bucket that the Chiefs are going to be in over the next few years. They're not going to be a team that can go out there and select Jahmyr Gibbs in the first round in 2023. For that reason, Clyde EdwardsHelaire should be more valuable in Dynasty. Also think about it. If Clyde EdwardsHelaire comes out and say he's being drafted as the running back 26 on Underdog right now, say he finishes as the running back 12 on a per game basis. Where's he going in Dynasty drafts? His Dynasty value will skyrocket. That will happen. The man's 23. Now, on if you should be drafting or not, I think it is a fine thought process to go through and trade for Clyde EdwardsHelaire in Dynasty because of this arbitrage. Like I said, go fire up some underdog drafts. I'm fine if you avoid him there. His price point there is higher. But if you're in Dynasty, I feel like you have to go after him, because if we look at where league-winning running backs come from, over the past few seasons, I mean, last year's the perfect example. They come from backfields where we don't know what's going to go on. We don't know what's going to happen. All we know is that offense is going to be elite. And if we just go through and we hop in a time machine and we go, okay, what were the running back backfields last season who we didn't know who the starter was going to be, but we knew that the offense was going to put up a lot of points. You had the Buffalo Bills, you had the Arizona Cardinals, and you had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Who were the league-winning running backs last year? Leonard Fournette, James Conner, and down the stretch, if you look at the touchdown volume, Devin Singletary was pretty damn good. Devin Singletary had a very high advance rate, a very high win rate. So if we just say, okay, Clyde EdwardsHelaire is probably bad, but the situation is this good, and you're getting him at a cheaper price point in Dynasty than someone like James Cook, than Elijah Mitchell. Like, give me Clyde EdwardsHelaire over Elijah Mitchell any day of the week. And we also look at CEH as a running back that last year had gallbladder surgery right before the season started. The man dropped weight. He was already small to begin with. Then he dropped weight. And not only did he have an off-season surgery, he also dealt with ankle, knee, and shoulder injuries. So there is an outside chance. It's a small probability, but there is an outside chance that Clyde EdwardsHelaire is not bad at football. And if that happens, he's a massive dynasty value right now. Like, if you want to avoid him in a redraft, fine, you do you, but I don't know if I can avoid him here. And now let's go over to another young running back that is going higher in redraft leagues than he is currently being valued in Dynasty. It's going to be Tyrion Davis Price. So Keep Trade Cut apparently has Tyrion Davis Price as the running back 50. Underdog Fantasy currently has Tyrion Davis Price as the running back 46. Now, this is someone that I think steps into a great situation. I know we're throwing some shade on Elijah Mitchell in this draft, but what is hilarious is to go through and to look at the leading rusher for the San Francisco 49ers since Kyle Shanahan has become their head coach, because it has changed every single year. Every single year, it's a new guy. I mean, if we go 2017, Carlos Hyde, 2018, Matt Breida, 2019, Tevin Coleman, 2020, Jeff Wilson, 2021, Elijah Mitchell. Now, I know Elijah Mitchell looked good. I get it. And a lot of people want to say, oh, okay, well, Elijah Mitchell is here to stay. Elijah Mitchell is here for the long haul. People were saying the same thing about Jeff Wilson. Like, if we go 5 years from now and we look back, I could easily see Elijah Mitchell being one of those names that's a flash in the pan. He's a Phillip Lindsay. He's someone that was great his rookie season, but he didn't have the team investment, and he was replaced shortly, and this team continued to churn through these running backs. Tyrion Davis Price has the investment. Tyrion Davis Price was selected epic 93 overall. This is a running back that is athletic. He ran a 4.48. This is a running back that weighs 219 pounds. I mean, he has some size. Now, of course, we would like to see the BMI at 30, but still, 219 pounds isn't horrible. What I will say, if we are going to play devil's advocate and why you shouldn't trade for Tyrion Davis Price in Dynasty, is if Tyrion Davis Price does hit in Dynasty, and if we think about his price point next offseason, because of the Kyle Shanahan effect and how they quickly churn through these running backs, you're not all of a sudden going to get Tyrion Davis Price as a third-round startup pick. That will never happen. I think the ceiling for him to increase his price for in Dynasty is probably jumping up into the Elijah Mitchell range, but for his probability of hitting, in my opinion, I think that's a pretty damn good bet. If you look at our running back prospect model and we compare Tyrion Davis Price to the other running backs that he scored next to, he scored the same as Marlon Mack, Jay Ajayi, Bryce Love. He scored directly ahead of Damian Harris, Terrence West, Matt Jones, Wendell Smallwood, DeAndre Washington, Mike Davis. Right behind James Conner, Devin Singletary, Donta Foreman. Don't include James Conner in this running back prospect model. Don't think he has upside of James Conner. Remember, James Conner had cancer in college. Like, there's a reason why James Conner was such a polarizing prospect, and honestly, you should not be able to look at his overall combine numbers and take away. But overall, I think that almost all of these running backs are great buys in Dynasty. Like, if you just assume that this redraft ADP is efficient, which I'm telling you right now, if you went through and you made your own rankings and you tested those rankings against Underdog ADP this season, you're probably not going to do that well. Like, there's been over $1 million pumped into these drafts. Like, this ADP is very efficient. And if we assume that it's halfway accurate, I think that these players in Dynasty are undervalued. Now, of course, you're only buying James Conner and a contender. I think you can buy Cam Akers, Clyde EdwardsHelaire, Tyrion Davis price almost regardless of your team situation. But of course, thank you so much for being a part of the Flock Sport on the channel. If you have not done so already, go down there, drop a like, subscribe if you play Dynasty. And all I ask from you is I hope you have a great day, and I hope we get to see you with the video tomorrow.